Right. Welcome to our next week. We are going to be discussing chapter 2 during this lecture video. Let me see if I can get this off the screen. Maybe not. So basically, for this week, when we're talking about chapter 2, and I just clicked on this, so I'm going to get back over there. All right, here I am again. Okay, so for chapter 2, we're going to try to make this a pretty short video because it's a fairly short chapter, but it's where we're going to actually really get started on some of the topics that are going to kind of do some assessments and things where we're going to really start kind of looking at ourselves, looking at what it is that's motivating us to get through college. Because all of us are here kind of on different terms. Some of us are coming back to school because maybe you've gone into the workforce for a while and you've decided, okay, I want to finish college because maybe I had started it many years ago. Some of us, may just be starting out kind of freshman area like that, and maybe still not quite sure what you want to do. And then there's those of you that you're very sure what your major is, what you want to be doing, and you're very motivated because there's a particular career that you want to get into. And so a lot of the things that we do throughout the book have a lot of assessments that really kind of help us look at ourselves, look at the things that motivate us, also look at things like how it is that we personally learn and how we can actually maximize those things. Once we learn more about ourselves, it actually is very helpful because then you can learn techniques and tools that are going to help you be more successful based off of, your own strengths, not necessarily everybody else's strengths. So, starting with chapter 2, it starts on page 34. And basically, right from the get go, when you start reading the chapter, it's going to go into the 3 M's of college success. And those are mindfulness. And then the second one is your mindset. And then the third is motivation. So when we're talking about mindfulness, it's talking about your ability to get ready to learn, what it is that you need to do to get yourself into that mode where you are going to be ready to learn. And for some of us, it takes a lot because, I know personally, I've been, sitting in a class and maybe my mind is somewhere else. Maybe I'm thinking of other things and I'm not really getting myself to that point where I'm really ready to learn and I'm ready to listen and I'm ready to actually take in that information and be able to use it to do well in my classes. We've all been there. And so we kind of look at that whole issue of your mindfulness and how it is that you can get better ready to learn. And as you read through that, I'm not going to discuss a lot of the details of it. That's going to be for you to read. And then the next one, basically, that starts on page 38 is talking about your mindset. And that's basically recognizing the value of effort. Because if you don't put in any effort, a lot of times you're not going to get a lot back in return. So read through that section. And the very first exercise that you're going to be doing out of the book, which there's going to be 2 exercises for chapter 2, and they're both going to be textbook exercises. If you don't have your textbook yet, that's okay, because this is one of the chapters that I'm still able to provide the exercises. And so you will see an attachment in the assignment folder for exercise 2.2. So if you don't have your book yet, you can just click on that attachment, pull it up, and you can either print it out and fill it out, or if you're able to, paste it into like a Microsoft Word document and then fill it out that way, that's also fine. And then you can either upload it as that kind of an attachment, or if you do it out of your book and you just write your answers out, you can just take a picture of it as long as it's legible and I can see the whole entire exercise, whichever way you have figured out so far that has worked best for you. So the first exercise, 2.2, is going to be on page 39. And it's called the Theories of Intelligence Scale. It is a very, very simple little assessment that you do, but it's gauging what your thoughts are on intelligence, because people have different ideas of intelligence. As far as, some people think that you are just born with a certain amount of intelligence, and that, once you've reached that point of where you have, I guess, learned as much as you can because your intelligence is limiting. People have that idea of intelligence. And then some people actually have that thought that you can always continuously build your intelligence and you can always maximize and then go past what you think you can go past. And everybody does have a different idea of it. And it could be, maybe just the way that they've been told their whole lives, this is kind of all you're going to be able to do. And some people believe that. And then you have people that always have that idea of, I can always do better. I can always learn more. I can always get smarter. So when you do this little assessment, you're going to see it at the very bottom of the page. So it's just this little one right here. And basically all you're doing, there's 4 statements, and you're going to read the statement, and then you're basically going to choose whether you anywhere from strongly agree with that statement, just agree with it, all the way to strongly disagree with that statement. And so you're going to write the number that corresponds with which answer you think is correct for that statement. And you're going to put that on the little blanks that are basically right there on the exercise. So you're going to read those 4 statements and you're going to answer based off of that. And when you get to, I believe it is page 40, as you finish this exercise first, when you get to page 40, when you're doing your reading, there is going to be an explanation of basically what that little assessment meant and how you answered it. So make sure before you read that entire section on mindset, make sure that you do this exercise 2.2 quickly. So that way, when you're moving on with your reading, you'll actually get an explanation of that assessment, but it's going to be based off of how you answered it. And there's no right or wrong answers with any of these exercises that we do in the book, because they're basically a way for you to get to know yourself and really how you think on a lot of different things. So don't think that you need to read all of the section first, then do the exercise because there's a better way to answer it. It's not. It is based off of how you believe, how you feel about certain topics. So just make sure when you're doing the exercises out of the book, you kind of have that mindset of, there's no right or wrong way to answer this. You're not going to get points taken off if you don't answer it a certain way. You need to answer it how you actually feel and think about it. So moving on from there, the next of the 3 M's is motivation. And this is kind of a bigger one that I'll probably just talk about a little bit more, mainly because motivation is one of those factors in college success that is major, because there's different ways that you can be motivated. And of course, there are certain ways and certain kinds of motivation that are better for you. They're actually going to get you through college much more successfully than other ways of motivation. And so when you're reading through that section, the motivation, when we're talking about it on the college level, it's talking about you wanting to actually learn, you wanting to actually take on these classes, learn and actually improve and get better and be able to use that information. Because let's face it, we're not always motivated to, take certain classes, whether it be because there's certain things going on in life and you're not motivated. That's not, your top priority at the time, or whether it be because maybe you're in college, not necessarily for the right reasons. Maybe you're there because your parents told you have to go to college if you want to stay at home and you don't want to have to pay bills. Or maybe, maybe you work a certain job and they're telling you, well, if you go to college and you take these certain classes or you get a degree, that you could get paid better. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're really truly motivated to go to college. You may not have even had any thought of going to college unless somebody else was somehow kind of getting you to do it. And that's kind of the point there. So the 2 different kinds of motivation that we talk about within the textbook is intrinsic motivation and then extrinsic motivation. And so the difference between the 2, which you do need to know when it comes time for testing for the midterm, the difference between the 2 is one is more of an internal driving motivation for you to do something. And it doesn't even necessarily just have to pertain to school and going to college. It could be if there's something that you really want to do and you are internally motivated, you are the one that is motivating yourself to do it. You are more likely going to be successful with that endeavor if you are the one that's driving the motivation. And then you have external factors, which is extrinsic motivation. And external factors could be anything from like your parents telling you need to go to college if you want to stay at home, or your job saying, hey, if you go get a college degree or you take these classes, you could potentially get a raise. And yes, who wouldn't like a raise? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you are truly motivated to go to college and get through it because somebody else is wanting you to do it. It's not necessarily something on your own that you're, oh, okay, I want to do this because I really want to do it. So it doesn't mean you can't be successful if you have extrinsic motivation, but it might make it more difficult for you to stay motivated because it's not you necessarily driving yourself to do something. And it's important to really learn about yourself and what your motivations are, especially now that you're here in college and you're taking college classes. What is it that's motivating you? Is it you yourself, or is it somebody else or some idea that you have to go to college to be successful, but you don't necessarily really truly want to be in college. Because let's face it, not everybody likes school, and that is just a fact of life. A lot of people do, and a lot of people they don't. And some people are kind of neutral. They're just like, no, I guess I'll do it because, what else am I going to do? So anyway, at this point, when you're in this section talking about motivation, there's an assessment we do, which is exercise 2.3. It is on 2 pages. So make sure you are doing both pages, because if you only turn in 1 page, I'm going to send you a message on your assignment and tell you that you didn't complete the entire assignment. And I'm going to kind of explain this one because a lot of times people don't add up their scores correctly. So I'm going to explain it a little bit to hopefully make it clear to you when you are doing this exercise. So basically this one, it's called the AIMS. It's the Academic Intrinsic Motivation Self-Assessment. And it is kind of a shortened version of an assessment that you could actually go to our Career Center. If you wanted to do most of these assessments that we do in the book, you can actually go to our Career Center on campus, and they have what I would call the in full versions of any of these assessments, where you would actually, after you complete them at the Career Center, they would actually give you a printout of a lot of good information about yourself, your learning styles, potential career areas that you could go into. And that would be really useful for some of you if you're not 100% positive yet what you necessarily want to major in. Those are really good assessments that you can do at the Career Center. And they would give you a lot of good information based off of your results that you could actually discuss with one of the counselors there, and they would be able to really go over all of those in detail. But as far as our book, it still gives you a really good basic idea of what your motivation is when you are doing this assessment. So basically, it has 25 statements on it, and it's the same as kind of that other exercise 2.2, where you're actually, for each one of these statements, you're going to select one of these answers, whether you agree, disagree, strongly agree, strongly disagree, or if you're neutral. Actually, I guess it has it more termed like, do you consider that statement completely true, somewhat not true, neutral, all of that. So you're going to choose which one of those answers based off of how you feel about motivation for that. You'll circle the answer that's most appropriate for you. And so, like, for example, number 1 says, I have academic goals. It's very general. And you can say, okay, do I have really true academic goals? Is that completely true of me, or is that completely not true of me? So circle the answer that's best for you for that particular statement. And then go through the whole entire thing, all 25 statements, circle the answer that is best suited to how you actually feel about that statement. And then at the end, what I want to just emphasize with this one is what it's going to do so you get your actual score. After you've answered and circled all of your answers and you get to the bottom, you're going to see that there is a blank column at the end of every single one of these columns. What you are going to do in order to get an accurate score, so you actually can see what your motivation level is you are going to be basically adding up your scores for each separate column. And when I say that, I mean, like, let's say, for example, you answered completely true 10 times. So that means you circled a 5 10 times on different ones of these statements. You're going to actually, that would be the same as just basically doing 5 times 10. You're not going to just say that you answered 5 times and write a 5 at the bottom of the column. You're going to actually say, I answered a 5 10 times. So you're actually going to add the 5s together, like, 5 plus 5 plus 5. 10 times, or 5 times 10. And so your actual score at the bottom of that column with the 5s would be 50 if you answered 5 10 times. And you're going to do the same for each column. So if you answered a 4 10 times, you're going to do 4 times 10, and so forth. So make sure you're actually, adding up the scores together, not just how many times you circled it. You want to actually add those scores up together for each one of the columns. And then once you basically put down what your overall score is for each column, then you're going to add all of those overall scores together to get a total score. And that's what you're going to put on the very last little blank that you see here that says overall score. That's going to be you adding up all of your answers for each one of the columns. After you've added all of the columns together, you're going to basically add all of those total scores together to get an overall score. So that being said, with your overall score, once you've completed this and you've gotten your overall score, there is going to be, it's kind of confusing because they actually explain what your overall score means, but it's on the page before the actual exercise starts. So it's on page 41 that you would actually be able to see an explanation of, once you get your overall score, what that means as far as this assessment. And it's basically saying, depending on what your overall score is, this is your level of intrinsic motivation. So that means based off of your answers. And most of these statements have to do with college, with learning. It's basically giving you an overall, what is your internal motivation to actually get through college and succeed and get through the whole entire process. And so read over that after you complete exercise 2.3. Make sure you read over on page 41 what your actual overall score means, and you'll understand better kind of what the assessment is trying to get at. And that's just basically, it's a good way to start off everything that we're doing in this book, to really know, okay, what is my actual internal motivating, like how high is my internal motivation to get through college? Is it pretty low? Am I going to have to try harder to get myself to that point where I'm really motivated to get myself through this? Or am I already really high on the motivation scale where I'm going to more than likely drive myself to be successful in my classes because I am here because I want to be here and I'm very much internally motivated to be here. And so as you're moving on, after you finish reading that and you've completed exercise 2.3, as you're moving on with your reading, it's talking more in detail about why self-motivation is the best kind of motivation to get you through school, because it's going to be a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It's not something that you accomplish just immediately. You have a lot of semesters to get through. And so if you have self-motivation, it's going to be the best way that you're going to be successful in college. But some people have to work on it. Some people do want to be in college, but they're not necessarily really motivated to do it. And so sometimes you have to do some things to get yourself to that point where you really get motivated to do it. And as you're moving on page, on page 46, there's figure 2.2, and it has kind of a cool, if you like more like graphs and pictures and things, it has a cool little, I guess it's like a chart basically that says how to focus. And you can kind of go through that because it has some interesting information there if you're more the type that kind of likes looking at like graphs and pictures and things. And then moving on with your reading, the next section is talking about your attitude, because that's another big factor in how you can be successful in your classes is, what is your attitude? Do you have a good attitude about going to class, or, do you need an attitude adjustment? And so it does have kind of a little section that's talking about the 5 ways to adjust your attitude. So if there's times that you find that you're not really being positive about your experience or classes or your professors or just the school in general or all kinds of other things, there's ways that you can kind of help yourself adjust your attitude to keep yourself more on that positive spectrum where you're going to help yourself get through your classes better. So read through that because it is definitely some good information. And then the last part of the chapter that we discuss is talking about the difference between values, dreams, and goals, because sometimes people use those words kind of as the same. They almost think it's the same thing. And there is really a difference between, what your values are, how that relates to what dreams you may have for what kind of maybe job that you have, or what it is that you dream about for your future, your success level, what kind of things that you want. And then there's a difference between even that and actually making goals and goals that you can actually achieve. Because dreams can be big, but that doesn't necessarily mean if you don't have a map to how you can achieve those dreams, then you may not actually succeed in achieving all of these things. And so your goals are kind of like that realistic, I have to set these goals in order to get closer to what it is my dream is, especially if you have a huge, a big dream of something that you want to do, what you want to be, where you want to be, 10 years from now. If you don't really have a path to get you there, you might get kind of lost along the way. So that section is a really good section about kind of discussing how those 3 terms relate to each other, but also how they are different from each other. So definitely read this section because you will see questions on the midterm about the differences between values, dreams, and goals. So make sure you understand those differences, how they relate to each other. And then on page 50, there is a section towards the middle, and it's talking about, the name of our textbook is called Focus on Community College Success. And there's actually a breakdown of how they term the word focus And that's basically fit, ownership, concreteness, usefulness, and stretch, which makes no sense right now as I say that. But as you read that section, it'll make sense as to why the book is kind of why it's called Focus and why they actually explain, basically the meaning of how the book is broken down, how we're going to kind of go about things throughout the book. So make sure you read through that section and understand what focus, the breakdown of focus is, because you will see a question on that on the midterm as well. So make sure you know that. And one little tidbit that I would say might be helpful to you when you do get your textbook is when I'm doing these lecture videos and I'm kind of saying, hey, this is something you're going to see on the test. If you have like a highlighter, or if you don't want to actually write in your textbook, but maybe get some of those little sticky tabs, put some sticky tabs in areas as I'm going through the textbook and you're doing your reading. So that way, when you do take the midterm or the final, you will more easily be able to go back to certain sections and be able to find, help yourself find answers. I do want you to study for your tests, but it is kind of helpful to more quickly be able to find actual topics in the textbook if you forgot something or if you want to refer back to it, because you can use your textbook on the midterm and the final because those are online and you're at home, you're able to use your book. But if you don't study and you don't give yourself some kind of way to find the information more quickly, your midterm and your final are timed. So you may find that it's going to be hard to flip through pages and trying to find answers if you're not actually studying some of the information and, leaving yourself maybe little sticky tab notes at places where there's going to be questions on the midterm or the final. So that's just a little word of advice that might be helpful to you when it comes time to take the midterm or the final, to be able to more quickly find things in the book and be able to help yourself in that aspect. And basically, this is pretty much the end of the chapter. And those are the main topics that I kind of wanted to go over and just discuss the exercises a little bit so you would understand how to do them correctly. So get those submitted. If you have any questions, otherwise, just let me know, but please read the chapter so that way you do understand the concepts really well, especially the ones that I pointed out that will be on the midterm. And yeah, just send me an email if you have any questions otherwise about anything for that. But that is kind of the beginning. As we get into chapter 3, that's where we're really going to be doing some really cool assessments that have to do with intelligence, learning styles, things like that, where you can really kind of learn a little bit more about yourself. And it also has a lot of good tips on ways to study and get ready for test taking based off of your learning styles and things like that, which a lot of students find really useful when we get to that chapter. But learning about your motivation is definitely important, and kind of understanding yourself better and where your motivation levels are is definitely something good to recognize. And that assessment that we do, exercise 2.3, is definitely kind of helpful in really seeing how you feel and how your motivation level is for college. So, all right, that's about it for this lecture. And the next one that we do, I will post at the beginning of the week for our next weekly folder that you see pop up in about a week from now. So, all right, if you have any questions, just send me a text.